Greetings, friends. I wanted to talk about how being old does not confer holiness on you. It does not automatically mean that people should respect everything that you have to say as an old person. Old people have lots of value to give us, and indeed we should listen to them. They have many lessons to teach us, but many old people become childish too. And I'm not saying my grandpa is childish. Maybe he has certain childish characteristics when you get past 100 like he is. Not just on my previous video where I discuss marriage and love with my grandfather, but in some other videos people have told me that I should stop interrupting my grandfather. I should respect my grandfather more. He has wisdom beyond my years. He is far wiser than I. And I should just listen more to what he has to say, because who knows how much longer he's going to be around. And I agree, who knows how much longer he's going to be around. I just wanted to fill you in on some of the details so you can understand why I get into these animated discussions with my grandfather and seeming that I interrupt him a lot. Well, sometimes I interrupt him because I want to finish my thought. And in that last video where he was wanting to know my genuine objections or conceptions about marriage, and I gave it to him, and sometimes he won't let me finish a thought, or sometimes I want to go and finish a thought. So that means I have to interrupt him sometimes, and he will actually interrupt me sometimes, and it's not like, it's not a bad thing. It's a friendly discussion still. It just might, people who might not be used to dealing with old people and might not know an old person the way I know him so deeply, they might find it kind of shocking. And the thing is, we're very intense personalities, he and I. And we've been having these discussions, these animated conversations for many, many years, since I was about 15. He came to live with us, with my family. For 10 years, I lived in the same house as him between 1998 to 2008. After his wife died in Oakville, he came to live with us because his daughter, my mother, he wanted to be around her. I mean, I wasn't in the house all of that time because I lived downtown for some time in university, but I would come back. But more or less for a decade, I shared the same residence as him, and I would come down and we would get into these discussions ever since that was between the ages of 12 and 22. Oh God. There's a fucking saw. You know, I go out of my way to fucking find a place in the city where there's not going to be any noise. I search for so many places. Now there's a fucking saw cutting down a fucking tree. So I lived in the same house as that man for 10 years. And my grandpa's a wonderful person. I love him very deeply. As you can see, I try to visit him frequently. We've been having these discussions for so many years. This is nothing new. And right from the beginning, I always thought he was well, how should I put this? He's an arrogant son of a bitch. I love the guy. Extremely stubborn person. He must be the most stubborn person I've ever known. And that's great. He's from a different generation. He has many things to teach me, many amazing stories. He survived the Second World War. He escaped the Soviets. He worked extremely hard as an engineer. But that doesn't mean you automatically get this wisdom, this holiness, when you reach a certain age, that everyone just has to listen to you and not question things and not give your own opinion. And especially in that video, I was sort of giving my opinion because he asked for it. We would get into these discussions from when I was 14, 15, 16, started to get into it a bit more, and it would always be the same. He's very persistent. He will poke me, figuratively and literally poke me. I mean, these days it's about me not being married, me not having a regular job. I try to explain to him that I have these investments in Ghana, and he knows about that, but then it doesn't sit well with him that I don't have a regular job here. I'm like, well, what do you mean I have companies? But that doesn't sit well in his mind. But right from the beginning, we would be getting into these heated discussions, these arguments, and I would be getting angry and maybe throwing a sofa cushion across the room, and that might shock you, but you know, we would get over it, and then half an hour later everything's fine. The same thing happened last weekend. I went over to visit him, and he's persistently poking me on the marriage question and the job question, and I didn't gotten enough sleep that day. I was getting kind of tired. And I said, please, can we not discuss this time? Can we not discuss it? And he keeps pressing me on it, and I snapped, and I took this bottle of peach schnapps, which I had brought him, because he likes the peach schnapps. And I took first I took the TV remote control and I threw it on the floor, and then I took the bottle of peach schnapps and I was like smashing this cardboard box with it. I didn't break the bottle, everything was fine. My grandpa was taken aback, shocked, but then, you know, everything cooled down once he understood that, you know, okay, let's not pursue this line of discussion anymore. Maybe you're saying, oh, Freethinker Silver, you have a thin skin. Well, you don't know what it's like to be around this guy. Everyone sees him as a lovely man. He is a lovely man. I'm just telling you, it does drain your energy to be around this man. It is kind of like being with a kid in some ways. Extremely stubborn. He's lived his life a certain way, and that's great. And that's why I want to go out of my way to share my grandpa with you, because yes, who knows how much longer he's going to be on this earth. So of course we want to learn what he has to say. But it's going to be animated. There's going to be interruptions on both sides. It's not going to be so polite all the time, because we're both intense personalities. That's how we roll. And as for the question that you need to listen to what he has to say, because even if you disagree, he's not going to be around here much longer. You have to give him more to say. But there's nothing more to say. I'm giving these interviews or these videos for you, because you haven't seen what he has to say, or I guess the last video was more of what I had to say, our interaction together. But there's nothing I haven't heard before. Yes, there's some strange stories he might tell us here and there, like he claims to have visited Asia. Details are very hazy on that. Little, factual things here and there come out of, but nothing philosophical, nothing about his general outlook. It's all the same story again. That same conversation about marriage or work, anything, many other things, has already occurred 10, 20, 30, 50 times before, because he has no short-term memory. He has absolutely no short-term memory. Every time I go to see him, we talk about the same things often. Often it's starting anew, it's starting afresh. Maybe if you repeated something to him on many, many occasions, he might now remember that I have something going on in Ghana. He wouldn't remember the specifics of what it was, or that's all you can do with someone like that. So someone was once telling me, like, you have to give your grandpa notice, but that you're going to interview him. You have to give him advance warning so he can prepare. It's like, no, there's no point in doing that. He knows that I'm interviewing him, though. I tell him, of course he can't remember, but when I tell him, he's fine with it. He's okay. He's even happy that people find it interesting. So thank you for watching that. So I'm not missing anything when you tell me to be quiet and listen to him. It's not that I'm trying to disrespect his character, it's just that sometimes I have to finish my thought. Sometimes here's another thing. Sometimes you have to interrupt an old person because they're moving the conversation off topic, and then it's like either you have to edit that out, which is, you don't ideally want to be editing out stuff. You want it to look as genuine as possible. But I mean, they have limited memory, old people, and they might go off on a tangent which isn't really related to the main subject. They may lose their line of thinking. So sometimes you have to stay on it. You have to stay on it, keeping the conversation or the discussion on a certain level, on a certain line. And that involves some interruptions here and there. He can interrupt me sometimes too. It's a back and forth play of energy. I love my grandpa Robert, of course, but he is only managed in small doses, because if you spend more than a few hours with him, your energy level starts to go down. So does that make my grandpa an energy sucker? Because I've talked about energy suckers before. In some sense, he is an energy sucker, and it's really perplexing, but I don't actually think that he's that kind of sneaky energy sucker. He's very blunt about it. he's always needed a woman to be around. He doesn't have that anymore, but you know, there's women in the retirement home taking care of him, but he's set in his ways. He wants to direct people. He wants to criticize. I would say criticizing. You tell him to relax. Hey, relax. I am relaxed. What do you, that's been his response for years. Grandpa, relax. You're all on my case. I am relaxed. And he's like totally not relaxed. And my mother was caught in a bind too, being in an unhappy marriage. Not an unhappy marriage. I guess she wasn't so satisfied with her marriage, and then my grandpa was living in the house too for all those years. It probably did contribute to her cancer, which is kind of sad. I'm not bitter towards my grandpa. I'm not saying he necessarily contributed to my mom getting cancer. Perhaps my mom should have known better, but she was caught in this bind as a Libra personality. They always want to keep in the balance even when they will suffer. And she once said something to me which I thought was very much hitting the nail on the head. She said, Grandpa is just so maladjusted, and yet, you know, he's lived a long and fruitful life, and that's such a perplexing thing. Is my grandpa an energy sucker? In some ways he is. But I love the guy. He's a great guy. What a character. So stubborn in his ways. He will smoke. He didn't always used to chain smoke, but now he basically, I wouldn't say he chain smokes, but he probably has 6 or 7 cigarettes a day because who cares when you're that old? And you're not allowed to smoke in the retirement home, and they've given him so many warning letters, and he can't remember them anyways. Apparently they gave him another warning letter a few days ago, and they're gonna bring the fire marshal in to give him a stern talking to. I remember when I was 16 or 17, I got an electric guitar, and I would go to, because he had his own apartment on the first floor of our residential house, my family's house in Etobicoke, and I would go down to his apartment, and I would bring my guitar, and one time I brought it, and I was showing him, and he's like, that's just noise, that's awful noise. You know, when you move the tabs on the guitar, it makes a sliding sound as you move from tab to tab. It's like he didn't like that sound, but that's a normal sound on a guitar. That's part of playing a guitar. It's like people just don't pay attention to that. They listen to the notes. But he didn't, that sliding sound on the strings, he couldn't stand that, and he's like, this is just noise. And very stubborn man, stubborn Scorpio, a water sign. I'm also a water sign. This is why we have these highly charged conversations. Sometimes you could call it an argument, and there's nothing wrong with arguing with a man who's 70 years older than you. And yes, I'm lucky, of course I'm lucky to have my grandpa in my life. My other 3 grandparents, I didn't get to know them that well, and if I was getting to know them initially, I probably wouldn't be behaving the same. If someone was being belligerent to me, then I guess I would kind of have to take it. But I know my grandpa too well for that. I know him too well. In fact, I know him probably better, just as good as any of my best friends. I just think people react this way and tell me that I have to listen to him, respect him, not interrupt him, because they haven't had that experience themselves. So I can understand that. If you haven't had that experience, or your grandparents all died before you were old enough to really deal with them on an adult level, then maybe you're brought up with the expectation that you must gather around the fire and allow the wise old man to tell stories and tell you what you got to do. But just think of how different his world is. Even from my parents, their world is different. My dad's world was entirely different, let alone my grandfather, who's 101 years old. The world has changed several times over. He came to Canada at a time when it was still all about factories, and it was a great time for a European immigrant to arrive. And there's just been so many changes in culture. You know, you can agree with the old people sometimes, you can disagree with them. Simply being old does not confer holiness. It does not mean that they are unquestionable. Hasta luego, amigos. Let's get this out of here.